And so, negotiation is actually one of the most difficult examples of difficult conversations. We actually have a special guest today. Susan Levin is an accomplished organizational coach and facilitator. She founded a company called Dialogue for Solutions in 1989. Her clients have included the United Nations, U.S. Agency for International Development, National Public Radio, even a Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. All of us have been actually faced with having a difficult conversation, whether with a colleague, someone who works for you, or someone you work with, or with a client. That actually happens oftentimes with our projects. And so Susan will actually give us a bit of guidance and tips on how to have difficult conversations.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, AJ. It's really great to be here with you all at SMA. And I would say something corny, like looks like big shoes to follow.
One second. Big sandals to follow.
Big sandals. I'll do my best on that. And yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you're interested in looking at how to have that difficult conversation. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides that I want to show you. And yeah, let's start with actually with the brain. Let me go down to the brain, because it really all starts here. We all have physiological responses to emotions and how we feel about something, because when it's time to have that difficult conversation, usually there's a reason for that, and there is something that's happened and you are triggered. We call it an emotional hijack. And so it's really interesting, and I think neuroscience is fascinating. There's so much more information about what we know about the brain. So if we look at this, we see right in the middle those two red dots there that are called the amygdala. Amygdala means almond shaped in Greek, and that's our fight or flight center. So when we feel like we are threatened, either we're going to stay and fight it out, or we're going to take off and try to save ourselves that way. So it's a part of our brain that we've had since we were cave people, actually. And so really important to know when this is happening for you, and that your emotions are getting triggered, and you feel it first in your body, somatically, soma meaning body. So really important to pay attention to that when you're in the midst of a negotiation, or you're having some kind of disagreement with somebody. Just see what it is that is getting triggered, because we all have that. Now, interestingly, it takes about 6 seconds to go from the amygdala, which is in the center of the brain, to the front part of the brain, which is our neofrontal cortex. This is our rational decision making. It's where we do our executive functioning. And interestingly, that part of the brain doesn't develop until we're in our mid to late 20s. So if anybody has a kid who does some wacky things under the age of 25, it's not really their fault, it's their brain's fault. But don't tell them, because they'll have that excuse. It's one of the reasons why rental car companies don't rent to anybody under 25. So with all that in mind, there's just so much that goes on emotionally for us. And interestingly, only about 1/3 of people are even aware that their emotions are getting triggered in the moment. And what happens when those emotions do get triggered, then what can go on is that cortisol, which is the stress hormone, gets triggered. And as we all know, that can be dangerous to our health if it's there for some prolonged time. So that's one of the incentives of really having the conversation you need to have. You're going to pick and choose, can't deal with everything, but when it is really important, it's going to be just that time to get it out and talk it through and see what kind of solutions you can come to for that. Like this quote a lot from Anais Nin, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So in any conversation, we bring multiple perspectives, we think about our own, and we tend to be kind of tunnel visioned on where we're coming from. So this is why it's so important to get in the other shoes, think about where they could be coming from, and then reflect on any assumptions that you could be making about what their intention is. Now, here are some decision points where you might then look at this list and say, okay, it's time for me to have a conversation with this person. So it could be that it's just been going on a long time, it's not resolved. I think about it after work. I feel like, it's really taken over. I may have tried everything, and let me see if I can see another way forward. And that's where dynamic dialogue comes in. This is a process that I've put together based on many different approaches, and we do have a handout on it. Lucky, did that get in the chat box so that people can take it later on? So what I want to do is I want to go through these 10 steps, and then we're going to have a short demonstration with Peter Sherman has graciously stepped up to play this out with me on a scenario. And let's check this out. So the first thing you do want to do is you want to cool down, because we know when we're in the midst of a situation and we get emotional, we may say some things that we wish we hadn't. So also important to find the right place and the right time for this. If you're crunching on a deadline, it's probably not a great time to raise this conversation. Okay, the second step is to start with how you see the situation. So I noticed, I observed from my perspective. And this is a way for you to own up and take responsibility to how you see how things have gone. And it also takes it away from the blaming of someone else. You did this, you said that. Then I want to let the person know, number 3, that the impact is. So if somebody is disagreeing with me or somebody's missed a deadline that impacts me, I want to let them know, because they need to understand the consequences. I move on to number 4, which is my intention for bringing it up, because if I can explain where I'm coming from with this, they don't have to make all those assumptions. They may anyway, but at least I am trying to explain where I'm coming from. Then I want to involve them in the conversation. This is where it goes to joint problem solving. So looking forward, what can be done differently? What do you think? So I want to involve them and I want to hear them out. Now, they may get defensive about their response to this. And one thing I can do there is to paraphrase. And if I paraphrase and say in my own words how I think they're seeing it, that also validates their feelings. I may not agree with them, but at least I'm hearing them out. Now what I want to do is I want to say, okay, so let's put our heads together. What are some options we can come up with? And whatever we decide, let's just try it on a trial basis. Let's do an experiment and let's see what happens. We don't know if it'll work, but we're going to check it out. Let's agree to a date. Let's give this 3 weeks to work. And then on February 19th, we'll come back together, check it out. Let's see if it's something that we want to continue to do. And so that's the process. I would say that dynamic dialogue does work best with 2 reasonable people.
Above 25.
So we know we're being reasonable. The other, maybe not so much. So, however, it is something a little bit different, because you're not telling the other person what to do. You're involving them in possibilities to resolve this problem moving forward. And you're just doing it as an experiment to see what you both think. All right, so with that, here is our scenario. And I'll just summarize it so that everybody has a sense of what we're talking about. So imagine it's you and a coworker, and you are working on a project for a client, and you've met to discuss the plan and the deliverables and everything. You seem to be on the same page with this. And now you're meeting again and you're talking about next steps, but now your coworker disagrees with the approach that you've already agreed to. Her ideas will change the parameters, or her or his, and enough to be a problem as far as you see it. So you tell them this, and you see from the body language that they're getting defensive. They're raising their eyebrows, they're sitting in a position, and you go back and forth, and soon your voices are elevated and the discussion is heated. How can you get back on track? Try to work this through with the other person. And so we're going to use dynamic dialogue to try and work this out. So thanks to Peter. He's going to come on, unmute himself, come online.
I'm unmuted.
All right. And I'm going to go back to the steps so everybody can follow along. And we'll begin. We're assuming that we've cooled down, or that I've cooled down. Okay. So Peter, I observed that at our last conversation, we didn't see eye to eye on some of the deliverables that we had already agreed to. And I wanted to have a conversation about that and try to understand more about where you're coming from.
Okay.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. So the impact is that if we change the deliverables, we might actually impact the scope of the contract with the client. And so I want to be.
I understand that, Susan, but
okay.
The fact of the matter is I have given this some consideration myself, and I believe that the insertion of a video here during our presentation makes perfect sense and actually helps our cause.
I think that's a really interesting idea, Peter, and I think we can explore it. I think what we need to do is first check on, again, the scope, and then let's see how we could bring in a video that won't change the parameters too much. So how would you suggest that we do this? Tell me some steps.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense. Again, I have to reiterate that I don't want you to think I haven't given this any consideration. I do think the video is definitely the way to go. And I think that all we have to do is insert it smack dab in the middle of the presentation just before we were going to go and ask for the business. It's worked for me in the past, and I see no reason that we would not be able to make this work this time.
Okay. So you're thinking of new business with the same client then?
Sure.
At this point.
Well, it doesn't, in this case, it's everything is new business as far as I'm concerned, Susan. I am not trying to draw a distinction between new business with an existing client and new business with somebody we've not done business with before. I'm just trying to get to the point where we get business. And the way to get the business is to insert the video. I tried to say this calmly, but at this point, I think I'm not sure you're hearing me.
Well, actually, Peter, I was going to say that I like your perspective. I like your attitude about let's get out there and get that business, because I'm on the same page with you about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward, let's see how we can check out the situation with the client. Let's discuss more about this video, how it could work. We probably need production to be involved to get it to be really professional. And let's figure out a date. Can we come back together next week and set up an appointment on, let's see, January 27th?
That sounds good to me, Susan.
How's 3 o'clock for you?
That'll work.
Excellent. Well, Peter, thanks so much. I think we really are coming around to see things in the same way. And I appreciate your willingness to do that. That's really excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
Susan.
you. Thanks a lot. Bravo, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Peter and Susan.
Let's give him a round of applause. I'm going to stop sharing at this time and just open it up for comments, questions, what you all think about this process. And it ain't easy. It's never easy to bring up a conversation with, when people see things in different ways.
Susan,
So,
I have a question about executive function.
yes.
So some of us, I expect, when we were teenagers, were told by our parents or maybe a teacher or a coach, you were born old. Does that mean our executive function developed early? Is that a biological thing or something else?
Oh, so do you mean like sometimes people seem like wise souls right from
Yeah,
the
when they're
get-go?
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't think that, and I have to look into that. That's a really good question. I don't think physiologically we all as humans are developing the same way, maybe a little faster, a little slower, but the fact that that executive functioning of the prefrontal cortex does evolve in our mid to late 20s is the same for all humans across the globe, no matter your background, ethnicity, racial, identification, etc. So that's what's so cool about neuroscience, is that it goes beyond culture, background, ethnicity, because at the basic element, human beings are 99.9% share the same DNA.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Do you have any other questions? Any real-time requests for help?
Well, I encourage you to give it a try. Do feel free to try dynamic dialogue at home. And, it's a way forward to just include the other person in the problem solving. And thanks so much for letting me be here and share that with you all.
Thank you for taking the time. Susan, this is incredible. I mean, I think this is such a huge improvement over, and I come back from the era of having read Urey and Fisher back from the early 80s out of Harvard Negotiation Center. And it was so theoretical and kind of simplistic, it really didn't I think wasn't that helpful from a pragmatic perspective, but your 10 steps are just incredible. They're fantastic.
I agree.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thanks so
great.
much. Excellent. All
I do
right.
want to remind everyone that your 10 steps are copyrighted. So let's make sure that if you want to refer to it, that we give Susan appropriate credit.
Thank you.
Susan is in process of becoming a resource at SMA. And so if you have clients or client projects where we actually have a need for a very skillful organizational coach or facilitator, please reach back out to headquarters and we'll see if Susan's available to support the project.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan. That was fantastic.